Hi guys, it's Sarah and welcome back to my channel. So today's video is going to take way too long to edit, I feel like. Today's video is a book review. I haven't done a book review since February, and since then I have read so many more good books. The one that I'm reviewing today is actually a book that I read last month in August, and that book is Stalking Jack the Ripper by Kerri Maniscalco. This book got a review of 4.5 stars from me, so I really enjoyed this book. For those of you who haven't read it, I'm going to give you guys a small synopsis. So, Stalking Jack the Ripper is about this 17-year-old girl named Audrey Rose Wadsworth who lives in 1800s London. Audrey Rose isn't like the typical girl for her time period. She interests herself with forensic science and doing autopsies on dead bodies for police investigations, along with her uncle, who is a forensic investigator and who is also her mentor. Mind you that she lives in a time period where her behavior is extremely frowned upon. Women have stricter social roles than men do, and they can't do what men do. So women have tea parties and they go dress shopping, and they certainly don't lead forensic investigations on murder victims. But that is what interests our main character, and during this story, she is an aide during the Jack the Ripper murders. So this whole book is about her doing the investigations with her uncle and his other apprentice, Thomas Cresswell. And also during the whole investigation process, she fights with who she wants to be as a person, her identity, what she wants to do, what she doesn't want to do, and also how the society that she lives in views her behavior. I absolutely love books with really strong female leads, and one of the aspects that I love the most about this book was that Audrey Rose didn't care what other people thought about her. She only did what she wanted to do when she fought for her right to equality and freedom. So this was a really great read, and I really recommend it. It's got a little bit of gore since it is classified as a horror, and it revolves around doing autopsies on murder victims, and not only on murder victims but on Jack the Ripper's victims, who were extremely brutalized. So if you're a little bit faint-hearted, I probably wouldn't read this because it is kind of graphic and it also has pictures in it. In the end, it's up to you if you can handle it or not. I am obsessed with this series. I am currently reading book 3, which is Escaping from Houdini, and I obviously love it. My favorite one was by far book 2 so far. I think that's all I'm going to say for this non-spoiler section. I will start talking about major plot elements and what I liked and what I didn't like in a couple of minutes. So if you haven't read it, I really highly suggest that you click out of the video if you don't want to be spoiled. All you have to do is read it, and then you can come back and discuss this with me. Did you leave yet? I'm warning you. Alright, let's get into discussing this book. Can you tell how much I love it by how close I am keeping it to my face? I'm absolutely head over heels about this book, about the series, about these characters, and I can't wait to discuss them with you guys, so I'm going to jump right in right now.
Where can I put you? If I put you there, are you going to fall over? No. Okay. Spoke too soon.
First thing I want to discuss is how I loved the historical accuracy of this book. Going into it, I was a little bit wary just because the Jack the Ripper murders are extremely documented, and it was one of the most popular cold cases ever. So I was really curious to see how she would put her own spin on it. Obviously, in the original Jack the Ripper murders, the murderer was never found. Still to this day, we have no idea who Jack the Ripper is. And obviously, for the sake of good storytelling, she had to determine a bad guy. So I was really curious to see how she played all of that out. And honestly, I was really happy with the way everything turned out. One thing that I was really happy that she included were the letters that Jack had sent to the press way back when, and they are accurate word for word. I'm a very big fan of serial killers and like the most popular cold cases and all of that stuff. I myself know quite a bit about the Jack the Ripper murders. I have watched documentaries and YouTube videos and have visited info websites about all of this. So reading this as a Jack the Ripper fan, that sounds really wrong, but I think you get what I'm trying to say. I was really appreciative for the author's attention to detail. If you've read this book and you don't really know about the original Jack the Ripper case from the 1800s, Jack the Ripper actually did send letters to the press written in blood, and he named himself Jack the Ripper, and I was very, very happy that Kerri had included the original letters worded exactly the same in her book. It's just little details like that that made my fan heart happy. Also, the way that the victims were killed in the book mirrors exactly the way that the victims were killed in real life back in the 1800s. So I was really, really impressed about the historical accuracy element of this book. If I follow the train of my current thought with historical accuracy, another thing that I feel that is worthy of mentioning is the part where Audrey Rose goes to visit her uncle who had been imprisoned in an insane asylum. I don't think I've mentioned this yet, but I am a psych major in university, and in my history of psychology class, I learned all about the history of insane asylums and why they didn't work and why they were bad. One of the main reasons why they were so terrible was because the people who were basically locked up there were horribly, horribly treated. Back then, diagnosing mental illness wasn't a thing, so people were labeled as crazy and locked up, and they were also drugged to keep them more docile. And in that passage in the book where Audrey Rose goes to visit her uncle in that asylum, he had been drugged by the asylum workers, and the conditions in which they were in are exactly accurate. They are almost naked. They relieve themselves in their cell. They are fed rather disgustingly, and it was just a bunch of little things that I think really point to the fact that the author took the time and the care to do her research properly for this book. It just makes me appreciate the book a whole lot more because I know she put in a lot of effort to make it as historically accurate as possible to be able to write the best book she could. Honestly, I applaud her for that. I'm a little OCD when I find inconsistencies in books that are supposed to have historical elements. So the fact that I didn't find any in this book was honestly so amazing, and it just made me appreciate the book a whole lot more. And also Kerri as an author. The next thing that I want to talk about is Thomas Cresswell. So for the past almost year, I have been back on Bookstagram, and for that entire time period, people have been raving about the Stalking Jack the Ripper series and also on Thomas's character. People always say that he is their new book boyfriend, book crush, and that Audrey and Thomas are their new favorite OTP, and I didn't understand it because I hadn't read it, but I read it now, and oh my gosh, do I understand it. I have, no joke, the biggest crush on Thomas Cresswell. He is my #1 favorite male character in the books that I've read recently, and his little budding relationship with Audrey Rose just keeps making me swoon. I have a notebook in which I write my reading notes, and honestly, most of what's in here about this book is mainly my love for Thomas. I don't know if you'll be able to see this properly, but the third point is literally I heart Thomas. Audrey and Thomas have such a fun dynamic. Their banter and their disguised flirting, it slowly killed me up until the point at page, I think I wrote it down, at page 261 where they finally kissed. So a little bit more than halfway through the book, that's when we finally got that Audrey Thomas kiss that we so desperately craved. My brain imploded. It was so beautiful, it was so swoon-worthy. I'm actually going to reread this passage because I feel like it's a worthy thing to mention in this review discussion. It's one of my favorite parts in this book by far, and like I said, the book is almost over when we finally get that Audrey and Thomas kiss. I had been waiting for it for the whole entire book, and that's another thing that I'm really happy about. Kerri didn't make this an insta-love. We didn't get a kiss or flirting in the first 50 pages. We only got a little something 50 pages from the end. Obviously, during the whole entire book, Audrey comments that she thinks he's cute, she thinks he's funny, witty, but we didn't get any hard flirting. We didn't get any physical advances. We didn't get any verbalization of, hey, I think you're cute, oh my god, I think I have a crush on you, and I want to kiss you. We didn't get any of that. It wasn't something instantaneous, like boom, they met, they fell in love. That's something that I cannot stand in books. And I knew that Audrey and Thomas were going to end up with each other because that's all Bookstagram ever talks about. And I was wondering if it would have been insta-love, but no, it wasn't. And I'm so happy about that. Okay, I'm gonna stop blabbering about insta-love and I'm actually going to read you the passage. Thomas held on to me as if I might turn to ash and disintegrate in his hands if he let go. He glanced up and down the alley we hid in, his chest rapidly rising and falling. There was a wild, untamed look in his eyes. I'd never seen him so unraveled. On the inside, I felt the same, but hoped I was doing a better job hiding it. I took a steadying breath. Thomas was a complete wreck. I gently touched his face, drawing his attention to me. Thomas, what? I thought I was going to lose you. He ran both his hands through his hair, pacing away and coming back. I saw blood. I thought he'd slit your throat. I thought... He covered his face with his hands, collecting himself for a few breaths, then fixed his attention on me, swallowing hard. You must know what you mean to me. Surely you must know how I feel about you, Audrey Rose. The thought of losing you? I'm not sure which of us moved first, but suddenly my hands were cradling his face and our lips were crashing together. Propriety and polite society be damned. There was no Jack the Ripper or midnight attack. There was just Thomas and me terrified of losing each other. It's just so cute! Audrey and Thomas are definitely one of my new favorite OTPs, and I lived for those Audrey Thomas moments that we got in Hunting Prince Dracula, and now I'm reading Escaping from Houdini, and they're even cuter, if that's even possible. I just love who Thomas is as a character. He isn't quite like other guys. He has a little bit of a peculiar side to him, but he's all for Audrey Rose being his equal. He never really looks down on her. He never thinks that she's inferior to him, and it's just so adorable. I love him and them so much. If I remember correctly, when I read this last month and I got to the part where they kissed, I think I let out an audible squeal. I'm not sure. I'd have to ask my boyfriend because I think he was there when I read this. But I love them so much, and I'm getting extremely flustered talking about them because I can't organize my thoughts properly, so everything is coming out weird. But this video is a discussion review. It's not scripted, so I'm just saying everything that passes through my head. So sue me if it's a little disorganized. But yeah, I really love Thomas, and I really love their relationship, and I love how it evolved in the future books, which I will talk about when I do the reviews for those future books. One thing I want to mention briefly before getting to my last topic of conversation for this video is how I loved Kerri's writing style. It was so easy to read 100 pages in the blink of an eye. The pacing for this story was really amazing. There were never any boring parts, truly. There were no slow parts. It was just a really well-written book, and I think this is Kerri's first book ever. I think this is her debut. I'm not sure, I could be completely wrong about that, but if it is, it's so impressive. One, because of the amount of research she did to ensure maximum historical accuracy. Two, because of the way this book is written. Honestly, you can't tell that it's her first book if it is. I really loved that this book gave me Criminal Minds vibes. I don't know if you guys know what that show is, but it's basically a TV show about the behavioral analysis unit of the FBI and how they profile serial killers in order to catch them and arrest them. Multiple times in this book, Kerri had Audrey, Thomas, and her uncle Jonathan talk about possible motives for Jack's killings, and they did their own kind of profiling, which I thought was really awesome, with all of the theories that they bounced off of each other of why he was killing the victims, why was he killing them this brutally, and all of that stuff. So that was something that I really liked about this book as well. It's now time to talk about the last thing that I wanted to discuss during this video, and that is the identity of Jack the Ripper. Like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, the real life case never got a conclusion. The case was never closed. Jack the Ripper just poof, vanished, disappeared, he stopped killing, and we never found out who did it. I highly doubted that Kerri would go the same route for her book. I was pretty sure that she would produce a villain for us. The whole entire length of the book, I kept wondering, who was Jack the Ripper? Was it going to be someone that Audrey knew, or was it going to be a total stranger that she was just going to find and arrest? I had no idea. Before I go any further, I'm just going to remind us all that Nathaniel, Audrey Rose's brother, is actually the one responsible for the murders. At the very, very beginning of the book, I suspected Nathaniel. Not too far along in the book, Audrey Rose had asked her brother Nathaniel about this guy, Alistair, who used to be employed by Lord Wadsworth, who is Audrey's dad. This Alistair guy was a possible lead in their Jack the Ripper investigation, so Audrey Rose wanted to know more about him. Why was he fired, and where is he now, that type of thing. So Thomas and Audrey go down to the docks where Alistair now works, and they find him murdered. To me, that was highly, highly, highly suspicious, because the only person that knew that Audrey wanted to talk to Alistair was Nathaniel. So immediately, not too far along into the book, I thought, okay, Nathaniel is the one responsible. Nathaniel is Jack the Ripper. I even wrote it down in my notes right here. Alistair was murdered. The only person she mentioned him to was Nathaniel. I don't know why, but her brother seems suspicious to me. So like I just previously mentioned, I did suspect him in the beginning, but the way that Kerri wrote her book cast suspicion away from Nathaniel, so that after this event, we completely forgot about him as a potential suspect. For a while, Audrey doubted that Thomas was the one killing those people because Thomas and her uncle were doing research on transplants. They were doing research on transplants because Thomas's mother actually died of gallbladder failure. There's this one passage in the book where Audrey Rose is thinking about all of the organs that Jack stole from his victims. And she thought about the gallbladders, and she said that she could have sworn that the gallbladder was missing from every single one of the victims. So, right there, we got a little bit suspicious of Thomas and also of Audrey's uncle. Then there was also the fact that Jonathan, Audrey's uncle, was arrested because he was in possession of evidence from those cases that he wasn't supposed to have. But the person that I was the most suspicious of for like the last 2/3 of the book was Audrey's father. All of the victims were people that he knew, that he had employed and had fired. He could have had the means. I mean, his brother is a forensic scientist who frequently dissects bodies. He could have learned something from him or had access to all of his anatomy notes. He also had a clear motive. Ever since his wife died, he has been an extreme hypochondriac, and most of the victims were either prostitutes or people who were not of noble blood, so who didn't have the resources to cure themselves if they were sick and to stay healthy. So there's your motive. There's also the fact that he was abusing drugs. He was frequently using opium. He had started taking opium after his wife passed to help with his grief and his anxiety and all of that. But as time went on, he used more and more of it and grew addicted to it. so it could account for the brutal way that those women were murdered. I don't know who you thought the Ripper was, but for the longest time, I thought that Lord Wadsworth had committed the murders, which is why I was so shocked for that ending scene. At first, when she finds this hidden laboratory of horrors in her dad's office, we put two and two together. This nasty house of horrors is hidden in her dad's office that he often keeps locked and tells his kids to stay away from. But then in comes Nathaniel, and our minds were just blown. Audrey, Thomas, and Jonathan had theorized that because various body parts and organs were missing from the victims, Jack the Ripper was trying to rebuild someone that he had lost, someone that he loved very much, and who was taken from him suddenly. Turns out that Nathaniel was trying to rebuild their mother. He had dug her up from her grave, frozen her, and had kept her all of this time in their house. And the only one who knew about it was Nathaniel, which is something that I find extremely creepy. Honestly, those last few chapters were so disturbing, where Nathaniel kind of tries to convince Audrey that what he's doing is good and that he's doing it for them, for her, because he knows how much that Audrey missed their mother. In order to use that secret part of their father's study, Nathaniel had been slowly drugging him more every single day, which is also something that I find highly disturbing. And just like the last few chapters where there was machine parts and organs and electricity and it was just... But it was so good. So yeah, I had briefly thought that Nathaniel had did it at the beginning of the book, but I really love that the way that this was written cast suspicion away from him and cast suspicion onto other characters. It was just so well written, which meant for a little bit of a shock. Even though we kind of knew it, it still surprised us, which is something that I loved about this book and the ending so much. The ending was super satisfactory. It didn't let me down, which sometimes is the case with mysteries / thrillers. If they aren't written properly, the ending is too predictable. In this case, it was predictable, kind of. The signs that Nathaniel had committed the murders were there. They were just hidden in plain sight, which is something that I think is remarkable, that Kerri had managed to trick us like that. At least that was the case for my reading experience. I don't know how the reading went for you guys. Did you find the ending too predictable or whatever? Let me know in the comments down below. We could discuss this further. But yes, all in all, I absolutely adored Stalking Jack the Ripper. I gave it such a high rating. The only reason why it didn't get 5 stars was because Audrey Rose's speech of wanting freedom and wanting equality was kind of repetitive. Like, it was important for it to be mentioned at the beginning of the book so that we kind of could establish who she was as a character, but she kept mentioning it over and over and over throughout the whole course of the book. I feel like it could have just been mentioned a couple of times in like the first 5 or 7 chapters. It wasn't really necessary to keep mentioning it over and over. That's the only reason why this book didn't get a perfect 5-star rating. That's it for today's discussion. Let me know down below in the comments what you thought of Stalking Jack the Ripper. This is one of my new favorite series without hesitation. I am loving the next books and I'm going to discuss them soon with you guys, like I mentioned. If you liked this video, make sure to give it a big thumbs up. Also, don't forget to subscribe to my channel to not miss any of the future videos that I'm going to post in the future weeks. Thank you all for watching and I'll see you guys in next week's video. Bye guys!